And thank you for joining us for Conversations with Ted. I'm Debbie Ausburn. I'm an attorney who works with youth serving organizations, and I've been working with those organizations for more than 30 years, starting out as a social worker and then going through as a lawyer when I was a criminal prosecutor, and now a civil trial attorney defending those organizations. I've also been a foster parent, volunteer, and a board member during that time. And I've written a book called Raising Other People's Children: What Foster Parenting Taught Me About Bringing Together a Blended Family.
Hey, I'm Tom Rawlings, and it's my pleasure to work with Debbie here on the Youth Serving Organizations team at TED. I bring kind of an unusual background to this work. I've been a practicing lawyer for 30 years, but I spent many years as a juvenile court judge, as the state child advocate for the protection of children, and most recently as the head of the Division of Family and Children Services here in Georgia. So Debbie's got the legal trial experience, and I bring a bit more of a organizational experience to our discussion today. And today we're going to talk about what happens when you have received a complaint of abuse, maltreatment, exploitation, you name it, in your program. When somebody makes a claim, how do you respond to that claim? We're going to kind of give you three main points, and of course, we're always available for more discussion on this. So, Debbie, what's the first thing folks need to think about?
Well, whenever the allegation comes in the door, I've noticed my clients tend to, if they haven't been through it before, they tend to get this deer in the headlight thing that happens, and they just become paralyzed, and they are sort of reacting to all of these claims from law enforcement, requests from law enforcement, licensing agencies, parents. Everyone's wanting to know what they know. And the one thing that tends to get lost in all of that is the first proactive step they can take, which is to suspend or isolate the accused perpetrator. And I think for youth serving organizations, we never want to believe that someone who works with us could be guilty of this sort of thing. And so we tend to take sides way too early. And we tend to try to trust our staff member before we actually do the investigation. And while I'm a big proponent of doing the investigation before you reach a conclusion, in this one area, you have to act as though the allegations are true before you do anything, and that is you have to suspend the employee, or if the claim is against another volunteer or child in your program, you have to isolate them and move them out and away from contact with potential victims as soon as possible.
Just for their own good too. I mean, one of the complaints that we often hear in these types of cases is, well, not only did you know about this claim against this person, but you also allowed that person to keep working or allowed that person to keep volunteering. So really for the person's own safety, so that no one, who may make up a claim about them or say that something happened after you received this complaint. So it really cuts both ways. That it certainly does protect the organization and its reputation, but it also can help protect the person who is accused of further complaints. But let's talk a little bit about your experience with the mandated reporting laws and why it is so important to report allegations such as this.
Well, the main reason is to protect yourself from potential liability of not having reported. In most of these cases, I know my clients tend to think, well, the parents have already gone to law enforcement. They've already gone to licensing. Everybody involved already knows about it. And I'm too busy answering questions and pulling documents. But again, in order to be proactive, you need to be able to say, I did everything I could and I fulfilled my responsibility. And when this allegation came in, we reported it to law enforcement, or in Georgia, you report it to Child Protective Services. Wherever the law says you have to report it, you make that report. even if you don't believe it, even if you're not sure, even if it's impossible for it to have happened, you still have a direct claim, and you have to respond to it by following your legal obligation of making the mandated report.
Yeah, and make sure that you do it as soon as possible, certainly within 24 hours of the report. And make sure that, I know some organizations, Deb, have a procedure whereby there's one person in the organization responsible for reporting. Make sure, though, that everyone feels free to report. The last thing you ever want is to have somebody say, well, I wanted to report this, but my boss told me not to.
I always recommend that my clients have a policy that their staff comes to them with the report, because the last thing you want is to be blindsided and have protective services show up for a report that you didn't know about.
And we're talking about communicating here, and I think probably your third tip we want to get across today is about how you communicate and how you're transparent with folks. So tell us a little bit about, like we said in our last episode, a lot of times lawyers want to hold everything close to the chest. Why is transparency important in a situation like this?
Well, transparency is very important because of the youth organization's mission and our obligation to our current clients, to our past clients, and to what we hope will be our future clients. So if you have a past client come through with an allegation, historic abuse, for example, you still have an obligation to them to be as transparent as possible. And then obviously, parents of your current kids are going to want to know what the heck happened. Are their kids at risk? Did this alleged perpetrator have any access to their kids? And what are you going to do to keep their kids safe if they leave them in the program? So you have to be transparent and answer all those questions as best you can.
So this is one of those situations in which no comment is really not your best option. Debbie, just before we get kind of end, I've always been intrigued by what you say is the best response to an incident by an organization you've ever seen. And I understand that was a mall in Minnesota where a person with mental illness threw a child off of a ledge or something at the mall. And how did the mall respond?
Well, it was a situation where the child fell 4 stories and survived, but it caused a lot of medical issues, as you would expect. And the mall stayed in contact with the family and with the victim. And you can Google it. It's Mall of America, and there was a lawsuit filed. And Mall of America obviously didn't talk to a lawyer, which was a good thing, because they didn't defend themselves. They didn't say anything about their policies. It simply said lawsuits are expected in this sort of thing. We are concerned about this kid. We will stay working with his family, doing everything that we can to encourage and help his recovery. And we hope that we can reach a settlement of this lawsuit, a resolution of this lawsuit that is mutually beneficial to everyone. And that was all it said. And I thought it was absolutely brilliant, because they kept the focus where it needed to be, which was on the child and his recovery. Well,
if folks want to know more about this, we're always here to help. This is the second in a 3-episode series. And I want to thank you all for watching Conversations with Ted today. Hope you'll watch the final episode of our series, we're going to talk about what to do after you've done the internal investigation. How do you deal with the results? How do you communicate those results to people who are important to both the victim, the law enforcement, and certainly to your stakeholder community? Thanks, and we'll see you again soon.